We're talking about decaf today, right?
We are.
I told you when we started talking about should we do a decaf show, my position is I consider it the equivalent of doing a show on the search for low THC marijuana.
It's interesting, I was on a panel with Canadian Coffee Association about decafs. The head of the Swiss Water Company was on the panel, and he made a very interesting point, which is that people are beginning to modulate the amount of their caffeine. It's no longer, perhaps with many coffee drinkers, it's not a either or, it's not a binary. Mm-hmm. And that's supported by the fact that at Coffee Review we're getting more and more half-calf coffees. It's a very creative opportunity too for technology and coffee roasters, so it interests me that way too.
And I would say the side for decaf, on the other hand, is, and basically for you and me, I think we are at the level where coffee is more about taste than it is the caffeine. You know, I mean, that's primarily, otherwise, I was only interested in caffeine. The least expensive cup of coffee at any gas station will supply me. It is about taste. Yes, if we can get fine tasting decafs, I'm all for it. I just haven't had them yet.
We've had 5 tastings at Coffee Review over the 20 years or so, 25 years, maybe 6 tastings of decafs, reports where we gather a lot of decaffeinated coffees and taste them. It's a pretty dismal record over those many years. It has seemed to me that one of the issues is not taking the caffeine out, but the fact that the roasters are not treating decaffeinated coffees with care and respect. The last couple tastings we had, it seemed like the reasons that the best ones popped was that they were fresh. They had come into the roasting company fairly recently, so they hadn't gotten old. Decafs don't keep very well as green coffees. And also there's roasting. You know, the protocol of roasting has to be different and more sensitive for decafs. We've gotten the impression at Coffee Review, even though we haven't done a big tasting, they've improved. Mm-hmm. We've had 2 amazing 93 rated decaffeinated coffees, some in 89, 90, quite a few. Oh, that's unusual. I don't know how indicative that is of a general improvement on the consumer level.
Today I've picked out 6 coffees for us to try. Now usually we do 5. The reason I picked 6, I just felt like this is really going to come down to a survey, and I didn't want anyone to say, oh, well, it wasn't thorough enough. By the way, I already envision that we have to do multiple shows on decaf, but there are a lot of them out there. I was surprised when I surveyed them how many there are, and yes, it does look like there's more of an emphasis on quality than I remember in the past. But I've got a number of different processes. I've got some roasts that are different. In one case, I have a decaf I think the varietal was chosen partly to be decaffeinated. I think some coffees will get in, I hope to discuss this with you, are certain single origin more appropriate for decaf. Will they decaffeinate better? And then, of course, there's the various processes. I think a lot of people might be curious about who thought of decaf. Is it that people were losing sleep in the early 20th century and suddenly occurred to them that, hey, maybe it's this coffee we're drinking?
I suspect it's just like anything else. It's people see a marketing opportunity. I should have refreshed my memory on this, but it's definitely a German laboratory, and Germans have always been particularly suspicious of caffeine, and I hope that's fair enough anyhow. Probably not anymore. I was in Berlin and got such great coffees and definitely very caffeinated. I'm not going to even attempt to get the date, but I believe it was at the turn of the century. The first widespread commercially available, used a solvent to remove the caffeine. They steam open the beans so the pores are open and the solvent selectively unites with the caffeine, and then you vaporize the solvent and wash the beans, and that's it. That's the direct solvent method, sometimes called the European method, because it's done by a lot of plants in Europe. Problem, of course, is the solvent, which trichloroethylene was used in the late 20th century. It proved to be carcinogenic. That was 1975. The EPA declared it a carcinogenic substance. So the switch to another solvent, methylene chloride. Now, there's no real evidence that methylene chloride of the quantities that are used in decaffeination hurts anybody. However, people don't like the idea. The direct solvent method with methylene chloride is probably what you get when you buy a European or a nameless decaf, one that doesn't name a process. It's almost certainly uses a solvent. Now, I would just say to people who are concerned about the solvent that it's very unlikely any solvent survives roasting, because the solvent vaporizes at 104 degrees Fahrenheit. And as we know, roasting goes up 400 Fahrenheit. In other words, 4 times the evaporation point for the solvent. But some people just want purity of mind and body and coffee. So the water-only process was developed over a long period of time. The process, Kevin, starts with soaking some beans. I'm going to call them starter beans in hot water. After the soaking in the water, these starter beans are disposed of and the caffeine is filtered out of the water. Then fresh beans that they do want to decaffeinate, are put into the water. These new beans contain caffeine, but the water doesn't. So by a process called diffusion, the caffeine migrates into the water, leaving behind beans that, voila, have no caffeine, or very close to none. These beans are then dried and sold as water-only decaffeinated coffee. The caffeine is filtered out of the water, by the way, and the water is ready to suck the caffeine out of another set of beans. And it's a tribute to how persistent technology is that they've been able to get pretty good product. That I remember giving a Swiss water, all water process espresso a 90 back some years ago. The latest process that's gotten a lot of attention by specialty roasters uses a different solvent, ethyl acetate. Ethyl acetate is derived from sugar, basically, in fruit, or they use molasses often. It's basically more benign by far than methylene chloride. The solvent is directly applied to the beans in the ethyl acetate process. Because it comes from sugar, it has a tendency to sweeten the coffee a little bit, which, since I'm a sweet tooth coffee drinker, I kind of like that, but we'll see. I will probably you probably picked a couple. I'm ready, by the way, to pour.
Oh, you are ready. Well, I'm ready too. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more shows like this.